theft increased 1,445% from the first quarter in 2022 to the first quarter in 2024.
The voice you heard at the top was that of Kathleen Dasal, presenting at this past November's annual conference of the National Association of Small Trucking Companies, and emphasizing the huge increase in cargo theft over these last years, aided and abetted by organized rings, increasingly sophisticated use of our digital communications tools to perpetuate all manner of frauds on carriers, brokers, and increasingly shippers themselves. That's as you'll hear in today's edition of Overdrive Radio for January 13th, 2025. I'm Todd Dills, Overdrive editor and your host as usual, and know that Dasal, now retired from a long career in transportation with the Ansonia company, part of the Equifax Credit Bureau network, keeps her feet firmly planted in small fleet issues with NASTC. Her presentation featured here you can download slides for via the post that houses this podcast at overdriveonline.com/overdrive-radio and in the show notes wherever you're listening to follow along. I'd recommend it with what's probably an appropriate way to kick off 2025 here, still in the first month of the year, in which we're expecting FMCSA's big move to revamp its registration system to get off the ground, as the identity and double brokering fraud issue continues to be one of the biggest difficulties to surmount in trucking, particularly for small carriers and owner-operators working spot markets. We hear a variety of tips and tricks, ways to spot fraud and phishing emails, and on fraudulent rate cons, and the very voice on the phone who might purport to be even someone you know, or at least to be from a company you know. For regular Overdrive readers, a lot of the anti-fraud measures Dasal speaks to will be refreshers, yet many share a central point that I might suggest to make part of your New Year's resolutions for the business this year, as it were. In Kathleen Dasal's words,
you've got to just pay attention to who your customer is and know who you're doing business with.
There's a lot owner-operators can do in that regard if you're not already working closely with central trusted brokers, leased to a motor carrier, or doing direct business with shipper customers, I'd wager. On the other side of a break, we'll jump into Dasal's presentation from the beginning, where she sets up the fraud and cargo theft problems with some quite mind-boggling statistics from the last years. Keep tuned.
Winter's here, and your diesel engine is about to face its toughest test. When temperatures drop, don't let gelled fuel leave you stranded. With House Diesel Treat, the #1 anti-gel on the market, you're protected. It prevents fuel from gelling, removes water, stops deposits, and even lubricates your fuel system. Gelling or icing emergency? Count on House Diesel Lifeline to get you back on the road fast. No mixing, no filter replacements, just reliable alcohol-free rescue from the brand you know and trust. Get House. Stay rolling.
You can find the full line of Howes fuel treatments via HOWES, HowesProducts.com. Here's Kathleen Dasal setting us up. Again, download those slides via the link in the show notes or via the post that houses this podcast for January 13th, 2025 at overdriveonline.com/overdrive-radio.
So this may seem a bit over the top, but as I was reviewing for this, the Mike Tyson's everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. I think what made this year seem kind of different was, we've got more organized crime groups now, and they're coming at the industry as a whole, not just carriers and brokers, but they're very organized, and they're taking a more holistic approach where they're getting everybody from top to bottom. So if you're remotely involved in the industry, you're susceptible to some kind of fraud. So I thought this was somewhat of a good analogy because it felt like the industry as a whole kind of got sucker punched the last year. So in my opinion, it's really reached unprecedented levels. CargoNet, I don't know how familiar you are with CargoNet, but they post a lot for the cargo, the freight planes and stolen cargo loads. They posted a stat claiming that theft increased 1,445% from the first quarter in 2022 to the first quarter in 2024. So that's how pervasive it's becoming. And what used to be kind of more isolated incidents by random fraudsters, it's kind of evolved into this highly organized and multifaceted operation with these fraudsters adapting rapidly new technologies and vulnerabilities. And what that does is they continue to expand their reach beyond the traditional areas like the double brokering, all the things we normally talk about, false billing, things of that nature. Now they're in the factoring, the load boards, even the FMCSA. I'm sure you've all heard of somebody, carrier, their NC number getting hacked. So, and they're going after credit companies again too, trying to create false files. So I think it's reached a new height. And I think with the digital platforms and with everything being so interconnected now, the fraudsters, they have new opportunities to exploit the gaps in security and the loopholes in the regulatory systems. So it's really made everybody vulnerable. At the 30,000 foot level, here's some examples of what I'm referring to about the industry-wide people, not just carriers and brokers, but of course the FMCSA. They are rolling out new security features. In fact, I don't know if there are going to be anybody speaking out. It's my understanding in 2025 for new carriers, even new carriers are going to do like a biometric identity verification where you're literally going to they're going to take your picture and compare it to a driver's license, and they're going to validate that you're a real person. They've partnered with some company called IDEMIA. So it's going to be interesting to see if that gets rolled out in 2025. Load boards, DAT and truck stop, they've got that multi-factor authentication right now. Supposedly they've weeded out over 10,000 suspicious accounts, but despite their best efforts, it's my understanding it's still happening. OCC is still reporting.
Bit of a quick reminder here. When Kathleen Dasal says OCC, she's referring to factoring company Orange Commercial Credit.
OCC is still reporting several incidences a week where they've got carriers or someone saying that they've been hacked. So I think there's clearly more work to do in the load board arena. The TIA's got a fraud task force. They're trying to figure out what to do. The IFA, I don't know, this may not be something you all are familiar with, but there's an organization called the International Factoring Association, probably north of 500 factors that belong to that. They used to have what's called a find a factor league. So if somebody was looking for financing, they could go in, put their information, and then the system would kind of find a good fit and send those leads to the factor. Well, they had to shut it down because it was so, they're just getting hammered with fraudulent applications. So they just shut it down entirely. And then Ansonia, I retired. Ansonia was purchased by Equifax a couple of years ago, but I'm still involved with, or in contact with some of the data guys, and they've been hammered again with these fraudsters trying to load fake data files, trying to just create, because they know factors, everybody's going to look at credit on these debtors, so if they can infiltrate the credit market with bad credit data, then factors are going to buy the bills, and again, it's just all part of the cycle. This you all won't be able to read from the back of the room. This is really just provided just as a reference. It's kind of like a day in the life of a factor. OCC just showed us just how many emails they're getting from their customers. They get their data account or all the load boards, they're getting hacked. So, okay, so now we're going to drill down a little bit and take a look at what's specifically going on a little bit closer to home in your worlds. What I've listed here are kind of the what I assume is mostly what the types of fraud that's impacting you members directly. Today what we're going to do is talk about those first three bullet points. We're going to go into the cargo theft, the double brokering, and kind of the identity theft. And before we go too far there, this is where some of my stats. Cargo thefts increased 45% just from 23 to 24. They're saying the average cargo stolen is over $200,000, about 63 occur each month. I thought this one, cargo theft is estimated to cost the U.S. $15 to $30 billion a year, which just Those are pretty big numbers. 26% of cargo theft occurred at cargo facilities. And again, I think these cargo thefts, these numbers are bigger because it's not just the one-off, double broker schemes or somebody just trying to steal a load. There's a level of sophistication, and these, what I keep calling like organized crime groups, there is what's fueling these significant increases. Okay, and then here, I'm sure most of you are familiar with just the breakdown of cargo theft statistics. The majority is in the food and beverage. We've got the consumer products. You can read all that on there. I'm not going to go through too much. And then they even go as granular as to have the theft by the day, time, and hour. None of these things stood out to me much either. It seemed, I don't know if you all are surprised by any of this breakdown, but it would just make sense. The times and the days. I thought the only thing worth noting was it looks like even the crooks take Sunday off, so there's only 8%. So I guess that's when they go and repent. And I doubt anybody's going to be shocked by this slide either. California, Texas, and Illinois represent 62% of the fraud. What I've read is because now we're going more from these one-off guys to more organized crime groups, that these guys are smart now. They want to stay under everybody's radar, so they're slowly now buying MCs outside of these states. So it's going to be interesting the next year to see if we see any real movement in this area. But right now, but it's been this way. These states have been on the radar I started in factoring in the 80s, but like from the 90s on, I know California was a huge hotbed, and Texas, so I don't think, we'll see if it changes. We're segueing now to the identity theft. We're going to I'm going to have examples for carriers, what you're looking at there, for the broker, and then we're even going to give you a few examples of what's going on the shipper side. On the carrier theft side, this is the one where it's really taken off. Is where you've got some fraudster that gets hold of the carrier's information on the FMCSA portal, and then they've got the keys to the kingdom, and then they can go and do what they want. It's my understanding, I sat in on a factoring fraud seminar probably like August, and the transportation attorney that gave that seminar also represents a lot of carriers. He's a transportation and factoring attorney. And he said that and he's been practicing 20 years, and through November of 2023, he maybe got one or two calls in his 20-year career about this identity theft. And then suddenly it's like somebody flipped a switch. And from November on, he said he was getting a minimum of a call a week on this. And I'll give you some examples, and you'll probably understand more what I'm talking about. Have any of you received these phishing emails, somebody trying to get into your FMCSA, your DAT? I've got some examples here. This is kind of what carrier identity theft or fraud looks like. Here, it looks like it came from the FMCSA. So you get this email in your email box, and they want you to update something. So you go in and do that, and it turns out this isn't the FMCSA. So we've highlighted some of the fake email addresses there, and just because it says .gov, you think you're safe, but you're not. So it's very easy to assume that these are legitimate, but we'll get into how you can ferret those out in a second. Okay, here's another one. Again, it's, the DAT. Has anybody had their load board? You have. They got hold of it?
Yeah.
And again, if you get the slides on your phone, you'll be able to expand and see the various, like the one FMCSA one in the corner, or the upper right-hand side, that actually came from an address with an FMCSA.com. I mean, that's got to be a red flag right there. But sometimes, you're busy. Like in the old days, you could just kind of go on autopilot and do this stuff. But now you really have to look at every email and consider that it could potentially be somebody phishing. So some recommendations. Well, first of all, question everything. You don't click on anything unless you really know where it's from. Never click on suspicious links. Hover over links to see the actual email address. And if you all are familiar with what I'm talking about there, and you'll see a hyperlink there. If you click on that, there's a short little video that explains how you can hover over something, look at what it is, and determine whether it's trustworthy. If you receive a supposed email from a government agency, again, even if it ends in .gov, don't still question it. Make sure you know what you're clicking on. Regularly check your FMCSA information. Somebody gets into you're on your MC and starts changing information. You're not going to have a clue that that's going on until suddenly somebody's knocking on your door trying to ask you where the freight was that you were hauling. Use a multi-factor authentication and do not share passwords. The password sharing thing, OCC just recently had a case where two people were on the same different emails, but I think that the passwords were the same and they both got hacked then. And then you can just expect for extra vetting procedures by brokers as well as like ELD requirements, because everybody is manning the battle stations now because it is so pervasive. Nobody is creating such a distrust and rightly so in the industry. I've talked about looking at where emails are coming from, hovering over, looking at the URLs. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this, but there are sites out there where you can verify a domain age. And on some of those examples that I gave you in the prior slides, we put those domains in on this website. And you can see like one of them was 5 days old when we did, and that was an FMCSA one. So, if you put something in and somebody just set up that domain 5 days ago, that's not going to be the FMCSA. And then on DAP1, same thing. So we gave you some examples and some screenshots of what it looks like, but this is a really good tool. You might want to like bookmark it so you can get to it easily, and all you have to do is cut and paste, and at least it will give you some idea of whether something's legit or not.
Dasal's talking about the whatsmydns.net website's lookup tool for a domain's age. Know that there are a variety of others out there too.
Broker identity theft, I would suspect that this doesn't surprise anybody. This has been going on for many years. Probably a lot more familiar with it. Just gave you a few examples just again to know what to look for if you're looking at rate confirmation sheets or emails asking for information. And this first one, the domain, the company is a corporation, but they've changed it from Corp to Inc. on the email addresses that they've provided on this. So this fraudster, even though it's a Corp, they didn't catch that, so they just called this company that it's Inc. Incorporated. And again, so there's domain inconsistencies, and then the other thing is the look of the rate. They noticed that this didn't even look like their rate confirmation. So if you notice that if you're doing business with somebody and the paperwork looks different, even if the domain went from Inc. to Corp, you've got to just pay attention to who your customer is and know who you're doing business with. And here's another one. This is just an example where the fraudster, they hacked into the load board account. They found a nice load that they wanted, and this was an email that OCC received explaining that somebody was posing as them, but what they did then is use a Gmail account. So instead of saying reply to the USA Logistics domain, they gave you a Gmail account. And you're going to see, it would have been fun to play like one of those drinking games every time I said to warn you about a Gmail account or to check a domain, because you're going to hear that through the rest of my presentation. Those, you got to watch out if you see a Gmail account from someone. There's no, I don't want to say it's 100% shot at it, but it's a big red flag.
And I would say particularly so when you're getting such communications from a broker of size or someone that purports to be an employee of such a broker. Keep in mind, too, that brokers are thinking about all the same things as they pertain to carriers as well. Might be time, if you haven't to invest in your own domain for the business and send official email from that address rather than just a Gmail account.
One last one here on this. Again, you can expand it, but there's several things, like the fonts are all different on these rate confirmation sheets. Fastlane's domain, they've altered that, and there's misspelled words. I don't know how much longer we'll be able to use this one. I think the more sophisticated guys can spell, but some of these fraudsters still cannot, because they're not. A lot of these, I think these frauds are outside the U.S. They aren't taking place here, so thankfully they don't have a good strong command of the English language. But so in this, also there was misspelled words, so that is something that just should raise the red flags. Okay, so some recommendations again. Google the websites if they've changed the domain, and if you go in and look at it, you're going to know that it's not who you're doing business with. Keep in mind, though, that sometimes they've been known to even duplicate parts of people's websites, so you have to be vigilant. But always try at least domain. Look at the domain. Look at the contact information. Make sure that and by Googling, you may see 2 or 3 things come up with different domain names that will tell you that there's some funny business going on. Also, on the FMCSA, if there's no phone number on there, then you might want to wonder what's going on there, and look for transfers. Look for any recent activity, because if somebody gets in and starts changing stuff, that's another reason to take a better look at who you're doing business with. Of course, we talked about studying the rate confirmations carefully, make calls on the load too, just to confirm, verify the phone number on the load. I know it's probably basic, but the rates, if you have a good understanding of where the load's going, what the going rates are, if it's too high or too low, that's a red flag. Gmail addresses, again, most brokers are going to have their own domain name, so make sure you really look if it's a Gmail. Keep in mind that they will sometimes just alter the same. They can buy the .org or .co or even .gov. So watch for the extensions as well. That just one little thing could make the difference between being a legit entity and not. Again, then look for the typos. And then if it's somebody that you do business with fairly regularly, keep a little, what I call a Bible, but where you can reference the rate confirmation sheet. So that way, if something, you can just quickly glance and see if anything looks kind of out of order or different. And then if there's any doubt, you can always check if you're factoring, check with NASDAQ, give them a heads up. I'm sure they stay in front of these things as well. I'm going to just cover 2 shipper identity examples here, just again to give you an idea. And this kind of goes back to what I just said, how just like one letter can make a difference. This was an application for Wegmans, and it's WEGMANS, and all the email addresses on this was changed to WEGMANS. So all they did was that second N in Wegmans they made an M. And it's just that one thing, and you lose a load. And this was kind of like the poster child of identity theft on a shipper. I mean, they gave like a bogus phone number. The domain names don't match the company. There's variations there. There's also Gmail addresses on this. And my favorite thing is you can see down there, Jonathan Williams is the one who filled this out, or he's the logistic manager. And then under the credit reference, when it asks for company name, all he did was put his name and a fake domain email address like 6 times on there. He just kept typing his name. And I think we covered everything. All right, so shipper, dig deeper. Look at the things, Gmails, if it's a Gmail, Outlook, AOL, any of those things on a credit app, big red flag. Domain name variations, again, you can go on, use that link I gave you, go on and look and see who you're really doing business with. Go to the company website, look at the company name, look at the individuals that supposedly filled out that credit app. Phone numbers, you can Google phone numbers as well. You can verify them off the website. Do anything you can to just independently verify the information you're being given. I'm segueing now. We've got this I just saw posted on LinkedIn probably like a month ago. And I don't know if anybody has run into this for when you go to park somewhere on these trucks, there's you have a QR code to pay. Well, I don't know that in the picture, if you can't tell, but if you look the picture on the far right, it just looks like a regular QR code. But then when you peel back that QR code, somebody put a fake QR code over the real QR code. So you just and I'm sure you've all gone to gas stations and they've got, looks like, a big thing of duct tape over where you put your credit card, and it's the same thing. They can put chips in and read. But now with QR codes, everybody thinks, oh, just go ahead and scan it and we're good to go. But so anyway, you got to even be careful with QR codes now. I don't know if you have had any inquiries to buy your MC, or if you are thinking about selling or know somebody that is. A lot of times they'll want to try and get your credentials, saying that they've got to do some research. And then again, that's like giving them the keys to the kingdom. Once they have that, it's out of control. So you need to make sure you're dealing with a legitimate buyer through a professional channel. Don't just ever give your credentials to somebody so they can vet you as a. And then I don't know, do any of you have Amazon Relay accounts? I'm not that familiar with those. Apparently those are like one of the most desirable MC numbers now if you've got this Amazon Relay. And I think it's because of the size of the codes.
Regular readers will recall the quote-unquote Illuminati hack this past year that involved phishing scams on both DAT-subscribed brokers and Amazon Relay users, and the establishment of fake accounts on the latter. Likewise, the prominence of the Relay platform in the MC number trade. I'll post links to parts of those series in the show notes, and likewise in the post that houses this podcast for January 13th at overdriveonline.com/overdrive-radio.
As the industry is like wrestling with this out-of-control fraud. These are just some things that we thought would be good to throw out there for you to consider implementing, or at least kind of have on your radar. If you don't already have your own email domain, consider getting one. Think of how many times I've said, watch out for emails, AOLs. I think it might get harder and harder to do business, or for somebody to take you serious if you only have a Gmail. And then don't, and on the factoring side, I see this a lot. Don't alter your business name a whole lot. Like, don't give somebody the ability to buy like a domain that's kind of close to yours. And because you sometimes will abbreviate or like pick a name and try to, stick to whatever those names are. Otherwise, you're just making yourself a little bit more vulnerable for somebody to create a fraud. And then depending on how many employees you have, how big your shops are, consider, have unique email addresses. Don't just have info at or support at, or try to give everybody their own email addresses. It makes it easier also if you lose an employee. Obviously, you can deactivate one email without having to tell everybody that they've got to change their passwords. Review security features for all logins. Like if you have the ability to add the multi-factor authentication, do that when it's available. Just try to take advantage of whatever sites you're on, have the security features, like take advantage of every single one that site offers. And lastly, again, depending on how many employees, but think about investing in a password manager. They're not that expensive. Then you and your employees only have to remember one password, and that's to get into the password manager. And then from there, if you want to share your DAT login with that individual, you can assign privileges, like who can see it, who can't, so that it's right there. You don't have to email them something. You don't have to, write it on a piece of paper that they could leave somewhere. I think they're pretty user friendly now. Like the learning curve, I don't think it would be too difficult to implement, and I think it'd be well worth the effort now. So if you are a victim of fraud, here's a little bit of a checklist. Notify your bank, credit card companies, contact law enforcement and your insurance company. Of course, if you've got a factor, let them know. Your local or your customers. We've also given you the links to the fraud hotline for DOT and then a FMCSA checklist for that.
You can look for that link too in the show notes for the podcast to help contain the damage should the worst happen. Do as many of the things that Dasal recommends, though, and here's hoping you never need it. That's a wrap for this week's edition of Overdrive Radio. Tune in next week for the big reveal of Overdrive's Trucker of the Year. Nominations are open for the 2025 contest via overdriveonline.com/toptrucker. Put your business in the running or nominate an owner you admire for his or her success at that link. That's overdriveonline.com/toptrucker. Overdrive Radio is a production of Overdrive, the voice of the American trucker. It's edited and produced by me, Todd Dills, with the acoustic guitar and other support of trucker-songwriter long-haul Paul Marhofer. The theme is Legend of the Snake Man by Marhofer, featuring the guitar work of Travis, the Snake Man himself, Whammock. Terry Two Socks Richardson on bass, keys by Tishomingo Jim Whitehead, and on drums, Andrew Marshall. Podcast is backed up further by Overdrive's on social media coordinator Jasmine Campbell, news editor Matt Cole, executive editor Alex Lockey, and video editors Lawson Rudisell and Andrew Gwynn. See you next time.